Hi, everybody. How are you doing? If you're joining me on Facebook or on LinkedIn or on YouTube, go ahead and pop a uh, comment into the chat so I know you're here. Thank you so much for tuning in. I just finished watching the final episode of The Handmaid's Tale, and I wanted to come on and have a conversation with any of you who may have watched that final episode about what are some key takeaways from The Handmaid's Tale that I think is so uh, timely given the fact that we are in the rise of authoritarianism, Christo fascism in the United States and a patriarchal state of white supremacy taking over. There's so many valuable lessons to be learned from The Handmaid's Tale, both about how the authoritarians rise to power and what we can do to resist that. So, thank you if you're joining me. Oh, I see someone has joined. Thank you so much. Go ahead and pop in the chat where you're joining us from. Hopefully, I can see your comments. And if you have any reflections on The Handmaid's Tale, please go ahead and offer those. So, some really key learnings I took from the show. Number one, I'd like to talk about the character of Aunt Lydia and her transformation. We see her backstory. Of course, she is the terrible persecutor who trains and punishes and conditions the handmaids to take their role as the childbearing uh, women who are forcibly raped in order to reproduce in Gilead. And Aunt Lydia, uh, she, prior to Gilead's formation, she was an empathetic teacher. And she actually was quite close to one of her students' mothers, a single mother. And supporting that single mother. And then Aunt Lydia herself had um, a date with the principal of the school where she taught. And during that date, Aunt Lydia expressed her desire to have sex with him, and he wasn't ready for that. He had been recently widowed. And you see the intense shame that Aunt Lydia put on herself and how that shame then got expressed in the way that she turned on the single mother and wound up reporting her to Child Protective Services, getting her separated from her child. And that to me, that lesson was really about how so much of the hateful behavior that women inflict on each other and the way white women in particular abuse our power over other women is really rooted in our own self-loathing and our own shame, and that so much of the way we can grow to combat white supremacy, to combat patriarchy and the onslaught of authoritarianism is to fully embrace and love ourselves and to practice self-compassion, and that it's okay for us to want to have sex. That's very normal. That's very natural. And to not be ashamed by it. If we can learn to accept when we make mistakes or things that are embarrassing, and still continue to love ourselves, then we won't be so prone to doing hateful things to other people and oppressing them. And so I think that's a really important lesson that I took from that particular story in The Handmaid's Tale. The second story I want to talk about is how The Handmaid's Tale portrays how vulnerable, in particular, girls are, and the way that the patriarchal oppression of girls is just so harmful and toxic to them. And here I'm thinking of the scene where it's the group wedding of many commanders, including Nick Blaine, and they haven't met the wives. It's all a prearranged marriage. And it turns out that the wives are all little girls. They're 13, 14-year-old girls like Eden, Nick Blaine's first wife in The Handmaid's Tale. And then we also see it with the character of Esther, who's 14 years old and is married to a man who's in his 70s or 80s or something like that, to another commander. And that really evoked for me like slavery and how, the enslaved girls would be raped at such an early age, and just how brutal and traumatizing that is for these girls and the long-lasting impact that it has on them. And then in particular, I remember when Eden is eventually executed for running off with someone else, and her family comes to visit um, Nick Blaine's family and the Serena Joy, and they are still supportive of Gilead, even after Gilead executed their 14-year-old daughter. It's just, yeah, we have to protect our girls from this horrific, horrific oppression. They are so, so vulnerable. Um, a third story I want to talk about, a third theme is the vulnerability of queer women. And we see that in Moira, we see that in Emily. And the story of Emily, who goes from being a very successful professor, to, this cultural shift where more and more male students are complaining about her. And then her mentor, the head of her department, also a gay man, tells her to stop displaying pictures of her wife and son in the office to try to tamper down um, the attacks on them. And he's getting attacked, and eventually he is lynched. And she tries to escape with her wife and child. Her wife is Canadian, and they're trying to leave the United States to get into Canada. And ICE agents actually prevent her from leaving because they say that her marriage certificate is no longer valid. And this to me really evokes, it's so terrifying right now with what is happening with the Supreme Court, how they overturned Roe v. Wade, and we know that they would love to overturn the recognition of gay marriage, LGBTQ marriage. They don't want um, couples other than where the couple is a heterosexual man and a heterosexual woman to be legally married. And this is so devastating and terrifying. The oppression of Emily goes on. Um, she begins a relationship with a Martha. They're found out. The Martha is executed, but because Emily is still fertile, they send her to the colonies. And then ultimately she gets they remove her clitoris. You know, I just, this show, we all need to watch it, and we need to um, work together to prevent this kind of oppression from happening. It is literally creeping into our society right now. We see it in in the this one big beautiful bill act that just got passed. They want to drastically increase the funding for ICE agents, armed ICE agents. They want to increase private prisons. All of this is in that Build Back Better bill, along with other provisions that would make women more vulnerable, taking away our health care, taking away Medicaid, taking away Medicare, the programs that many women and children depend on for their health insurance. I mean, literally, the whole point of this administration is to make women and children more vulnerable, less able to be educated, um, poorer, sicker, and they are also trying to reduce the age you can get married in many states, and they're also trying to remove no fault divorce. They want to make it so that um, you know it's very difficult and costly to get divorced and make women dependent on men in order to get divorced. And I have a comment here from Jasmine. The lessons are maybe it's delusional to want to harm your unborn children so badly that you make an entire television drama suggesting opposition is really about slavery. The lessons are maybe it's delusional to want to harm your unborn children so badly. Okay, Jasmine, I'm having a little difficulty understanding your comment. Maybe you could clarify a little bit. I don't fully understand what you are saying there. Okay. So another lesson from The Handmaid's Tale is thinking about what life was like before Gilead got instituted, and we see scenes of June and Luke and their daughter and how happy they are, and June and Moira having fun together, June at work, living this very enjoyable life, going to brunch, drinking mimosas, a life that's very, very recognizable. And then things start to shift, and they shift really quickly. And by the time they realize how bad things are, the police are shooting down protesters. And so it becomes very difficult to do anything to prevent Gilead from taking power. And how important we see in this last episode that we just saw, how really organizing, really, it's not just showing up to protest, but it's organizing networks. The way we see how Mayday is a network of people who support each other in the resistance, and they're able to help each other. This is the type of thing we need to be organizing, and coming together with like minded people around mutual aid, around how we can. Help people if they need to leave suddenly, or whatever the case may be. This is a very important principle that, the whole in an authoritarian state, there's very, very few people who are in power, but there's literally police everywhere. Like, and you notice that whenever the handmaids are walking around, um, in Gilead, you always hear that chatter, and you see the armed guards everywhere, and you see that they're all connected via walkie-talkie. They're constantly watching what is going on. This again evokes for me like slavery. Like, slavery would not have been possible if it weren't for the militias that all the white men were required to go serve a certain number of weeks every year in the states that had slavery on these militias, and it's through violence and oppression and guns that they were able to keep this system in place. This system where everybody is pitted against each other. So it makes it very difficult for people to resist. And I think that is one of the, to me, I learned so much about, um, how slavery lasted for 246 years, even though it was obviously wrong and should have been gotten rid of a long time ago. And it was, benefiting a handful of people at the very top, but they were able to institutionalize so much political power, um, uh, gun, violence, power, control over this whole society, that is how they remained in power. And how this whole, like, we need to talk with each other. We need to, those of us who are um, trying to resist this system, we need to see how we're being pitted against each other and instead come together, unite, talk with each other, and work together. That is how, that is how Black people brought down slavery. It took a very long time to do that, but through organizing, through an intergenerational struggle. And this is what we are engaged in right now. Being opposed to abortion has nothing to do with slavery. Being opposed to abortion. Being opposed to abortion has nothing to do with slavery. Okay. Um, okay. Another thing is, um, when the commanders order the eyes to cut off Serena Joy's finger. And we see how Serena Joy obviously is very useful to the commanders. She is someone that holds a lot of power and influence in Gilead. But when it comes down to it, the patriarchy does not care. The second you become inconvenient to them or you do something they dislike, they will punish you. There is no loyalty. There is nothing you can do in a patriarchal system to please them enough. They will always hold this power and use violence and domination to maintain their position of power. And no matter how much white women acquiesce to them, it would in the end they will just crumple us up and discard us like a tissue when we are no longer useful to them. Um Okay, another lesson from The Handmaid's Tale. Oh, yes. Commander Wharton, Serena Joy's second husband, how he goes from being this very charming suitor, dancing with her in the street, having flowers sent to her, doing all of these very uh, gentlemanly things, um, to this elaborate wedding and then carrying her over the threshold of their beautiful home. And then he instantly, he has this handmaid who's a gift from the evil, evil commander's father. And then he instantly turns into a horrible, horrible person. And you see how this happens so much. This happens so much that when you're being courted, when a man wants something from you, they will charm you, they will do all of these things to make you feel safe and appreciated and loved. And then when you enter into the marriage, it turns out to be a trap because they never really then all of a sudden they just want to totally control and dominate you. And that is exactly what happened. And of course, it should have come as no surprise. Obviously, if you are a commander in Gilead, you know, um, you're going to be an oppressor. But that was a very telling lesson, I think, from the show. Okay, another one is the handmaiden Natalie, who is who has a mental breakdown in the store, and a guardian shoots her, and then they keep her alive despite the fact that she is in a coma until she gives birth by cesarean, and then she quote succumbs to her injuries. And this exact same scenario is happening right now in Georgia, where a Black woman, a nurse, a mother, a wife, was pregnant. She had terrible headaches. She went to the hospital and they gave her some medicine and told her to come home. Her headache did not subside. She went back to the hospital, and now she is brain dead. And she is, due to Georgia's anti abortion laws, they are keeping her alive against her will. I mean, well, she doesn't have a will because she's brain dead, but they are keeping her alive until the baby comes to term in August. And the family's going to be responsible for paying all of her medical bills. I mean, it's just a very, very, very shocking situation. I mean, how can I put it? It's not shocking. There's all kinds of terrible things that are happening right now, where women are being denied the care that they need, whether they've had a miscarriage or have complications with their pregnancies. They are literally bleeding out in emergency room parking lots because doctors don't want to care for them because of the very strict bans on abortion care in many states. And now they're even looking into, the federal government wants to reduce or take away mifepristone, which is a very safe way. It's the way most abortions are done in the United States now, through medical treatment, through pills. And yeah, it this is absolutely devastating, okay? I saw a quote on Facebook, that if you are a fetus inside someone's uterus, you have more rights than the person whose uterus you are in. You know, this is not right. Women need to be able, pregnant people need to be able to self-determine for themselves what is right for them, what their needs are, and have access to the care that they need to live their lives, to take care of their families, to do everything that they need to do. It's a terrible, terrible situation. Oh, let me see. Overall, and I think I touched on this earlier, um, I think the show, um, uh, another aspect of the show that shows how oppression works is how anyone who defies the order is publicly lynched. and their bodies are left hanging there as another way to intimidate people and make them constantly scared, and to have the people, like the handmaidens, always have to walk together places. And Alfred says it's because they're supposed to be watching each other. The this whole making people distrust each other, making people fearful is a huge aspect of authoritarian control. So those are some of my thoughts about The Handmaid's Tale, this last episode. Oh, I see there's some more people who are on here. Has anyone else made some comments? I would love to see your comments if you have reflections. Um, yeah, I thought the this last episode that just aired, I was really touched by the conversation between June and her mother, and it really reminded me of how, the abolitionist struggle in this country was an intergenerational struggle, that the people knew that they would not see the end of slavery in their lifetime, but they were raising up their children to continue the struggle. And that each generation was pushing as hard as it could. And I just want us folks, we are, I was born in 1969. I'm so lucky. I'm so grateful for the civil rights movement and everything that Black people did to fight for the rights of all other marginalized groups in America, that benefited me, that gave me protections from workplace discrimination, that gave me um, um, access to higher education, that gave me all kinds of rights that came out of the civil rights movement. And now literally politicians are trying to take all of that away from us. They want to take us back. When you look at the origins of this country, when you look at 1619, what was going on back then? The laws of property, of marriage, of slavery were all tied together. And uh, you know, um, obviously, uh, there were the at the beginning there were white indentured servants and Black enslaved people, but they mixed and were together in many ways, intermarried, etc. And then when there was rebellion, the white landowners came together and said, "Oh no, we have to create a hierarchy. We have to convince white people that they are superior and that Black people are subhuman, and we need to start this whole militias and this racial hierarchy." And also, they literally imported white women to this country to produce white heirs and make the plantation an intergenerational enterprise. And during those times, under the law of femme couvert, when you got married, you literally ceased to be a human being. You could not enter into contract. You could not own property. You could not make decisions. Like literally, you became part of your husband. And they're really trying to take us back to that kind of system where men hold all the rights and women are vulnerable and impoverished. You see it when Gilead took over, and they were going to the cafe to get a coffee, and all of a sudden their debit card wouldn't work because Gilead had frozen their bank accounts. And then all the women were let go at work, and all these steps to make women dependent and vulnerable. So I just urge everyone watching to gather together with your sisters, gather like-minded women, watch The Handmaid's Tale together, have these conversations about what is going on, and figure out how you can support each other, what we can do to remain personally strong, financially strong, how we can be politically strong at this time, and collectively strong. That's what we need, to come together and to resist. And I loved it when June said that Gilead didn't need to be beaten; it needed to be broken. So much of this is in our minds, right? And the way we think of ourselves, the way we think of each other. And so building those strong bonds of trust. I love how in the show, Moira and June just keep showing up for each other. And they are so fierce in their devotion to each other. Um, and that's the kind of that's the kind of sisterhood and solidarity that we need to get through these really intense times. So thank you so much for tuning in, everybody who's joined me. And please do leave your comments about The Handmaid's Tale. And yeah, uh, great talking with you. Okay, bye.